It's a beautiful day at Cedar Lane Unitarian Universalist Church. Let us celebrate by rising to sing hymn number 38, Morning Has Broken. Words are on screen.
Buenos días y bienvenidos. Good morning and welcome. I am the Reverend Katie Romano Griffin. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm one of your ministers.
I'm Reverend Abhi Janamanchi. My pronouns are he, him, and I am one of the other ministers. And we welcome you to our worship service this morning.
Our words of welcome are filled with our deepest aspirations, and they call us to embody beloved community when we responsibly say the words, "You are welcome here." So whether you're joining us for the first time or you've been a member since our founding in 1951, let's say it together, you are welcome here. Whoever you are, whomever you love, you are welcome here. Whatever your gender identity, expression, beliefs, or immigration status, you are welcome here. However you arrived at this beloved place, in person or online, you are welcome here.
If you're joining us for the first time today, welcome. And if you feel comfortable doing so, please raise your hand so our ushers may find you and offer you a special gift to welcome you to Cedar Lane, and also a brochure that talks about Cedar Lane, in which there is a place for you to share your information with us. Thank you so much for choosing to worship with us. Let us give our guests a special Cedar Lane welcome. I would also like to draw your attention to the announcements page that you may have picked up on your way in. It contains a wonderful snapshot of the many ways love works at Cedar Lane, so please take a moment to go through it. I'll just highlight one event that's happening next Sunday, January 19th at 3 o'clock, our 6th annual interfaith service to celebrate the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s birthday. All right. So, friends, the service will include participation from various interfaith leaders in our county and the region, as well as wonderful music by the People's Community Baptist Church's Men's Gospel Choir, the Suitland High School Choir, which some of us may remember from a concert they did last year, as well as the Zainab Ensemble, which is an a cappella Muslim women's group. and wonderful reflections from my dear friend Imam Tariq El-Gawari and the Reverend Dr. Haywood Robinson, the senior pastor at People's Church. So please come. And not only to show your support and be in solidarity with people of other faiths and cultures, but also to mark the day, to remember and recommit ourselves to the prophetic legacy of Dr. King. Thank you.
Amen. If you've been attending for a while and are interested in membership, please connect with me after service. We also have a very special class happening on Thursday night that Reverend Abhi is going to be teaching. It's at 7 p.m. on Thursday night. And if you're new to Unitarian Universalism or you'd like a refresher on Unitarian Universalism, it's 7 p.m. on Thursday.
600 years of Unitarian Universalism in about 45 minutes. So.
We also have a special 7-class series that starts next Sunday morning from 9:30 to 10:30. It's called the Seekers Series, which introduces you a little bit to Unitarian Universalism and a little bit about all of the wonderful things happening at Cedar Lane and how you can become more deeply connected. So that begins next Sunday between services, 9:30 to 10:30.
So you're basically encouraging people to walk out on you.
That's right, because I'm preaching next Sunday. Actually, it's to come in the morning and then catch the full service at 11 after Seekers. Maybe it's all-day church.
Our pastoral visitor today is Betsy Binks. She will be available during and after the service if you have a joy or concern that you wish to share. Thank you, Betsy.
Let us turn now and greet our neighbors, especially our new friends.
Wow, thank you for that wonderful music. We have seen the great cathedrals, stone laid upon stone, carved and cared for by centuries of human hands. Seen the slender minarets soar from dusty streets to raise the cry of faith. Seen the placid pagodas where gilded Buddhas sit amid the temple bells and incense. And we have seen the tumbled temples, half buried in the sands, old truths toppled and forgotten. But here, we build temples in our hearts. Side by side we gather, scavenging the ages for wisdom, cobbling together as best we may the stones of 1,000 altars, leveling with doubt, framing with skepticism, measuring by logic, sinking firm foundations in the earth as we reach for the heavens. Yes, here we build temples in our hearts, a temple for each heart, a village of temples, none shading another, connected by well-worn paths, built alike on sacred ground. Come, let us build and worship together. And as Brian and Diane Ballinger kindle the chalice, symbol of our faith and gathered community, please rise in body and or in spirit to share in unison the chalice lighting words on screen. May the light we now kindle and the time we share together anchor us to that inner flame, that sacred center, which helps us remember who we were before the world told us who it wanted us to be. May we glimpse again what it means to be whole, and may the chalice flame symbolize our deep intention to listen deeply, love mightily, and journey with integrity toward our highest ideals. Thank you.
Angels' feet have
We gather each week at this river, not for our own needs alone, but to bear witness to the joys, triumphs, our sorrows, and our disappointments. In this circle of care, we make space for life's complexities, the many experiences that bless and break our hearts. So I invite you to intentionally settle into this space with me, fellow travelers. To allow yourself to rest comfortably in your seats, feet sinking towards the floor, with your attention on your breath. Maybe you'll close your outer eyes if you feel comfortable doing so, or allow them to rest on the flame in this symbol of our faith as we breathe into this space. We are here together to serve as companions on this life's journey. Let us breathe that truth in together. For we are not truly alone. As I move through the litany today, I invite you to take a breath after each phrase. As we repeat together, we hold you in our hearts. If you are living through the small and extraordinary milestones of life, let us take a breath. We hold you in our hearts. If parenting is your spiritual practice, let us take a breath. We hold you in our hearts. If you are mourning the loss of a loved one, if you live with or care for someone with grief or chronic pain, let us breathe. We hold you in our hearts. If you are struggling with illnesses seen and unseen, with mental illness or addiction, we hold you in our hearts. If you have suffered abuse or injustice, if you are a survivor, we hold you in our hearts. Kathleen Reedy and Fred Peters in this community are recovering from surgery, finally at home. We hold you in our hearts. We acknowledge the passing of both Diane Tesh and Laura Mae Dillow, long-term members of Cedar Lane. Laura Mae and Diane Tesh, your families. We hold you in our hearts. Lori Funston Boyd and Roger Boyd have had 2 losses in the past week. Lori's aunt Barbara Baker and Roger's uncle Harvey Boyd. Lori and Roger, we hold you in our hearts. Our caring extends beyond Cedar Lane to all those whose lives are impacted by calamities and violence in our world. Our hearts extend to the families of the 176 people killed in the Ukraine airline crash in Iran, and all those in the Bahamas and Puerto Rico who've been impacted by the earthquake. These friends of ours, we hold you in our hearts. Let us take this love that we have both received and shared into silence. And if you are grieving the loss of a loved one or commemorating the anniversary of a loss, I invite you to rise in body or spirit, in mourning and in memory, as we hold this silence together with our breath and our shared love. May all prayers be answered, may all hearts be restored, and may we know that we are never truly alone. May it be so. Amen.
Today we share our offering with the Unitarian Universalist Service Committee, the UUSC. We received a note from the UUSC President and CEO, the Reverend Mary Catherine Mourn. She writes, Unitarian Universalist Service Committee is an independent member organization dedicated to advancing human rights and social justice internationally. Our work is grounded in the values of Unitarian Universalism and the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. We use an eye-to-eye partnership model that centers the experience and leadership of our grassroots partners. We accompany and fortify partners as they struggle to achieve their due human rights. For 80 years now, since its founding at the dawn of World War II, UUSC has dared to work on some of the world's most desperate human rights crises. Currently, UUSC is focusing on three main areas of human rights need: Central American migrant justice, climate-forced displacement, and crisis response. Like most UU institutions, we carry forward this bold work with a modest budget. We work smart, we strive to be agile, and our work with our partners, innovative grassroots organizers, and courageous activists has proven to be a very effective way to make a tangible difference in places where people are often left behind by larger, more bureaucratic organizations. We are proud to receive the highest rating from Charity Navigator for our financial health and our accountability and transparency practices. We're able to do all that we do because people like you, and indeed some of you in this room, make it possible with financial support. On behalf of the other 40 people on staff and our partners and allies around the world, thank you. In that spirit of gratitude and service, our offering will now be given and gratefully received.
In the words of the Reverend Lynn Unger, through the work of our hands and the work of our lives, our love is made real. May we be grateful for all that we bring and share to make love real at Cedar Lane. Amen. For all that we bring and share to make love real. I didn't used to think of religious worship in those terms. Even as an altar server or a reader in the Catholic Church, the experience felt very one way. Belief was something that was given to you, not something you contributed to and built. And my wife and I first came to Unitarian Universalism out of that background. And we first came to Cedar Lane in major part because the religious education program here felt like something we wanted our kids to be raised in. The people who were involved, the way the program seemed to help the youth of Cedar Lane grow was very appealing to us. Now that was just about 10 years ago, a fact which amazes me every time I think about it. And I feel how Cedar Lane has helped us grow when I look at the people my son and daughter are on their way to becoming. They are caring and open in ways that I don't believe I was at that age. And seeing their growth and now taking an active part in my own and possibly in yours has helped me to feel grounded and helps make Cedar Lane feel more and more like our spiritual home.
Clinging
Thank you, members of the choir, Henry and Jasmine, for that rousing anthem of that very familiar and memorable hymn. Thank you. It also is a wonderful anthem that reminds us of the work that we need to be engaged in, given it was a protest song that Pete Seeger and others led, especially protesting against the House Un-American Activities Committee. And Henry, thank you for your shared ministry, which also is a family ministry, by welcoming Michael. Where's Michael? There he is. For that beautiful music today, Michael. Thank you. Thank you. And thank you, Jared, for that powerful reflection. You captured the essence, meaning, and purpose of a religious community. That we exist to be a laboratory for learning, for spiritual growth, that we do intentionally together. Because spirituality is not a solo pilgrimage that we get on. It's not a Lone Rangerist activity. It is something that we work on together. So thank you for lifting up that important principle. So in ancient India, there once lived a sculptor who was renowned for his life-size elephant sculptures. And so one day, a king came to see him, to look at his works, and to commission a statuary for his palace. Struck with wonder and awe, the king asked the sculptor, "What is the secret of your artistry?" So the sculptor replied, "Great king, when with the aid of many workers I quarry a gigantic piece of granite from the banks of the river, I set it here in my courtyard. For a long time, I do nothing but observe this block of stone and study it from every angle. I focus all of my attention on this task and don't allow anything or anyone to disturb me. Now, at first, I see nothing but this large, shapeless rock, just sitting there, meaningless, indifferent, and out of place. It seems fairly resentful at having been dragged from its cool place by flowing waters. But then, slowly, very slowly, I begin to notice something in the substance of the rock. I feel a presentiment, an outline, scarcely discernible, starts showing itself to me. So I see it with an open eye and a joyous heart, and the outline grows stronger and stronger, and lo, behold, I see an elephant sitting there with its tusks curled high, thick legs trampling the earth, and its trunk trumpeting to the sky. Only then do I start my work. For days and weeks I use my chisel and mallet, always clinging to my sense of that outline, which grows ever stronger. How the big fellow strains, how he yearns to be out, how he wants to live. It seems so clear to me now, for I know the one thing I must do with an utter singleness of purpose. I must chip away at every last bit of stone that is not elephant. And what there remains will be, must be, elephant. When I was young, my grandfather, my spiritual teacher, would often tell me such a story, not only to entertain me before I went to bed, but to convey essential truths of spiritual living. Perhaps I asked him, as revered teachers in every religion have been asked, what happens to us in a spiritual life? What are we supposed to do? Now, my grandfather was not a theologian, so he answered these questions simply with a story like that of the elephant sculptor. He was showing to me that we do not need to bring our real self, our higher self, our Atman, into existence. It is already there. It has always been there, yearning to get out. An incomparable spark of divinity is to be found in the heart of every person, waiting to radiate love and peace everywhere, because that is its nature. Amazing, isn't it? This you that sometimes feels inadequate, that sometimes feels unworthy, sometimes becomes afraid or angry or jealous or depressed, that searches on and on for fulfillment, contains within itself the very fulfillment it yearns for, and to a supreme degree. Indeed, the happiness and tranquility that we sometimes feel, sometimes unbidden, like when we felt when that music was being sung, are actually reflections of that inner reality. No matter what mistakes we make, and who doesn't make them, this true self is ever pure and unsullied. No matter what trouble we cause to ourselves or to others, and who hasn't caused them, this essential self is ceaselessly loving. And once we have become attentive to the presence of the self, then all we really need to do is resolutely chip away whatever is not elephant. Now, I'm not saying this is easy or quick. Quite the contrary. It can be done in a week or by the weak-willed. But the task is clearly laid out before us. By removing that which is petty and self-serving, we bring forth all that is wholesome and life-giving. In this, there is no loss, only gain. The chips that fall away are of no consequence when compared to what will emerge. And I think that's what the Reverend A. Powell Davies, who served as minister of All Souls Unitarian in Washington, D.C. from 1944 until his untimely death in 1957, was saying when he said, life is just a chance to grow a soul. Now, some of you may actually have heard him say that from the pulpit. Is there anyone here who actually encountered and was blessed by A. Powell Davies' preaching ministry present today? I know there are some of our members, but okay, you're present in spirit today. But that's what our third Unitarian Universalist principle points us toward when it calls us to affirm and promote acceptance of one another and encouragement of spiritual growth in our congregations. The point you were making, Jared. I believe, as Reverend Davies did, that life is the chance we have to nurture our souls, to bring them to maturity in this one wild and precious life, as the poet puts it, that we have been given. Because you see, Unitarian Universalists, I've said this before, believe in life after birth. Or to put it another way, we believe in life before death. So we are clear that we have this one life that we have been given as a gift. And we are called to do the best we can with it. So how do we go about it? How do we grow our soul? How do we cultivate and expand that undefinable, intangible aspect of self? So I would like to propose to you this morning 5 basic principles or behavioral guideposts for spiritual practice or practices of integrity, if you will. They are paying attention, being rooted, being patient, risking vulnerability, and serving a life larger than our own. First, paying attention is indispensable for spiritual growth. Regrettably, among the mental skills American culture typically encourages, attentiveness is given short shrift. Children are constantly admonished to pay attention. Yet, little, if any, effort is made to inculcate that ability in them. It is, however, the prerequisite for any worthwhile spiritual endeavor. In his famous essay, All I really needed to know, I learned in kindergarten, Unitarian Universalist minister Robert Fulghum draws our attention to the word look that figured so prominently in those old Dick and Jane elementary readers. It is indisputably the biggest word of all, Fulghum argues, because everything you need to know is in there somewhere. The golden rule and love and basic sanitation, ecology and politics and sane living. That being the case, what could be more important than teaching ourselves to attend? Now, another word for attention is mindfulness, which ancient Indian and Chinese sages contrasted with its opposite, inattentiveness and distraction. In the Buddhist tradition, there is a story about a king who rushed up to see the Buddha right before he was going off to battle. The king said, "Oh, enlightened one, I'm on my way to war, and it is possible I may be killed. So I am in desperate need of your deepest spiritual teachings. However, I must hurry to my soldiers so they don't lose their courage. Can you sum up all your teachings in one word?" To which the Buddha replied, mindfulness. Mindfulness. Pay attention. A second guidepost to spiritual growth is the willingness to be rooted, staying put. The renowned novelist Wallace Stegner once complained that almost since its inception, American culture has encouraged its citizens to get up and get out. The promise of greener pastures or greater adventure seduces us into leaving our ancestral homes. But as Stegner wrote, neither the country nor the society we build out of it can be healthy if we don't stop raiding and running. We must learn to be quiet part of the time and acquire the sense not of ownership but of belonging. According to a 2007 study of the U.S. Census Bureau, the average American moves once every 5 years, or 11.7 times in their lifetime. This ever-increasing transiency is one of the major reasons our families, communities, and ecologies have become unsustainable. Rather than create viable livelihoods and livable communities where they already are, Americans have always hearkened for a more perfect environment, a mythical Shangri-La. There are legitimate reasons, however, for getting up and getting out, including loss of local employment, the pursuit of higher education, and environmentally related health concerns. Nevertheless, much of our movement appears to be based on personal preference rather than necessity, and it may subvert our happiness. To be rooted, Simone Weil insists, is perhaps the most important and least recognized need of the human soul. Most communities owe their health and beauty to what Stegner calls stickers. Over the years, such people have learned something of the forces that shaped that community, or aware of its unique and irreplaceable qualities, have grown to appreciate its long-standing traditions and know what's required to preserve its important cultural assets. It is only by knowing a place, its past and present, that we grow to treasure it and thus are motivated to care for it. This principle applies not just to individuals or families, but also religious communities. Being rooted. To be rooted requires more than a modicum of patience, the third of our behavioral guideposts. Impatience is an epidemic these days and is most noticeable on our streets and highways. People's respect and regard for each other all but disappears the moment we get into our cars and merge into beltway traffic. Impatience is antithetical to safety, civility, and seriously jeopardizes our sense of community. And those who are continually in a hurry lose the capacity to reflect meaningfully on their own actions and thus find it difficult to maintain their core values, especially in challenging circumstances. His Holiness the Dalai Lama likens patience to a muscle. And like any muscle, it is strengthened through regular exercise. If our goal is to cultivate calmness and enhanced ability to work through our anxiety and acceptance of others, put the practice of patience at the heart of your daily life, the Dalai Lama urges. At no time is this more important than when we have experienced a deep loss. In former times, a lengthy period was sanctioned for recovery from the death of a loved one. Today, however, people are often made to feel guilty if they mourn for more than a few months. Get over it and get on with your life is the not so subtle message our impatient culture sends the bereaved. This is a dangerous trend, for studies have shown that foreshortened mourning has an adverse effect on the survivor's mental, emotional, and spiritual well-being. Integrating loss into the depths of one's soul does not take place in sound bites, the noted grief counselor Alan Wolfert warns. Individuals should be allowed to do this demanding work in their own way and at their own pace. Unfortunately, contemporary managed care seeks to hasten the grief process, which has prompted Wolfert to compose this addition to the biblical Beatitudes. Blessed are those who mourn quickly and efficiently in response to abbreviated counseling techniques, for they shall meet our criteria for successful treatment. In this area and a few others, less efficiency and more patience would seem to be in order. Which brings us to the fourth guidepost for spiritual growth, risking vulnerability. Dr. Brene Brown, a research professor at the University of Houston and a well-known author, has spent many years studying vulnerability, courage, worthiness, and shame. In one of her books, Daring Greatly, How the Courage to be Vulnerable Transforms the Way We Live, Love, Parent, and Lead, she writes, "We have to dare greatly to be vulnerable." And counterintuitively, she says, when we are vulnerable, it can help us to become braver. She says, vulnerability sounds like truth and feels like courage. Vulnerability sounds like truth, because when we tell the truth, we have to show our imperfections, our doubts, our failings. And first, we have to admit that to ourselves before we are willing to share it with others. And it feels like courage because it is hard to be authentic. It is downright scary, especially if we are caught in that toxic dependency to perfectionism which I know none of us here are afflicted with, it can become even harder. Brown continues, truth and courage aren't always comfortable, but they are never weakness. You see, being vulnerable is not the problem. Fear of being vulnerable is. And it's fear, she says, that makes us put up all kinds of armor and shields, and then we get so comfortable behind all that armor, used to living with that armor on, that we begin to wear them even when we no longer need all that armor. And one of the reasons we put on all that armor is because we feel shame, because we think somehow we are not worthy enough to be loved and accepted as we are. So what does it mean for us here in this religious community? It means that if we do believe that building connections and living those connections is important to live a wholehearted life, then our message of the inherent worth and dignity of every person, our first principle, is a life-saving message. And even if we fail at this, and we will fail at this daily, that's okay. Seeing and accepting our frailties, foibles, and faults is part of being vulnerable. But we must see our failings as just that, and not as inherent unworthiness, somehow that we are all lumps of sin, irredeemable. That's not our theology, by the way. Now, we will mess up, and our community will mess up, but we're not hopelessly and irredeemably messed up. Dr. Brown says, vulnerability is the birthplace of love, belonging, joy, courage, empathy, and creativity. It is the source of hope, accountability, and authenticity. If we want greater clarity in our purpose or deeper and more meaningful spiritual lives, vulnerability is the path. And we see this stage of spiritual maturity when we look at the lives of people like Mahatma Gandhi or Dorothy Day or Mother Teresa or the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and more recently the Dalai Lama and Pope Francis. Remember that incident on New Year's Eve as the Pope was trying to greet people and leave, and then one woman just grabbed him and wouldn't let go, and almost he fell over, and then he did that. He apologized the next day, saying that was not the right response. Wow. Vulnerability. Risking vulnerability. Which brings us to the final element of a mature spirituality, serving a life larger than our own, or paying it forward. The Reverend David Park says, an authentic spirituality will seek not only one's own comfort, one's own healing, one's own happiness, but that of significant portions of the community one inhabits. The standard of fulfillment is an inner standard, aiming at solitary achievement, but it must be a shared standard also. A public standard assuring the enhancement of life of the entire community. Or, as the Reverend Bill Schultz would put it so bluntly, given that's how he is, a private spirituality which fails to engender a passion for justice is a sickly, pallid thing. So while spiritual growth is a worthy and necessary endeavor of a religious life, the ultimate goal is not to just do that and feel good about ourselves. It is actually to use that sense of inner goodness and peace to share what we have found with others. Or as Rebecca Parker says, to choose to bless the world. The choice to bless the world, she writes, is more than an act of will, a moving forward into the world with the intention to do good. The choice, she says, will draw us into community, the endeavor shared, the heritage passed on, the companionship of struggle, the importance of keeping faith, the life of ritual and praise, the comfort of human friendship, the company of earth, the chorus of life welcoming you. So our soul grows deeper when our hearts expand, and our heart's expanse grows wider. So, we grow our soul by paying attention. We grow our soul by being rooted. We grow our soul by practicing patience. We grow our soul by risking vulnerability, and we grow our soul by serving a life larger than our own. And we grow our souls by engaging with ourselves and one another more humbly and honestly, more deeply and willingly and lovingly, as we seek to live lives of joy, hope, integrity, and service. And to that endeavor, I say, amen. And the people say, amen. Please rise in body or in spirit to sing, Come Thou Fount of Every Blessing, number 126. Words are on screen. As you feel moved and comfortable, hold your neighbor's hands or bump elbows. The great American poet Adrienne Rich, in her masterpiece Fantasia for Elvira Shatayev, tells the story of a women's climbing team, all of whom died in a storm on Lennon Peak in August 1974. I want to close our time together with the words with which she closes her poem as our benediction and going forth. In the diary, I wrote, "Now we are ready, and each of us knows it. I have never loved like this. I have never seen my own forces so taken up and shared and given back. After the long training, the early sieges, we are moving almost effortlessly in our love." In the diary, as the wind began to tear at the tents over us, I wrote, "We know now we have always been in danger down in our separateness, and now up here together. But till now we had not touched our strength. In the diary torn from my fingers, I had written, what does love mean? What does it mean to survive? A cable of blue fire ropes our bodies burning together in the snow. We will not live to settle for less. We have dreamed of this all of our lives. We will not live to settle for less. We have dreamed of this all of our lives. May it be so. Please be seated for the postlude.